We were hanging out on the couch, and suddenly it was just the loudest noise coming from behind us. And you just see 3 men dressed in black with masks, with guns, with a duffel bag coming at you SWAT style very, very quickly. I was just begging, I was screaming, no, 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 don't hurt my daughter. At that point, I was face down on the carpet. I couldn't see her. The first thought that went through my mind is, are they here to rape us? Are they here to murder us? I certainly never would have imagined that they were there because of my job.
Jag heter Jenny Borg och jag heter Linn Ek. Och nu börjar Spöktimmens gästavsnitt. Vi ska testa något nytt. Alltså det är så kul. Jag är så taggad och vi hoppas att du som lyssnar också tycker att det här är kul.
Precis, för vi har ju gjort en ny grej. Vi har ju faktiskt intervjuat gäster på engelska, vilket är så roligt. Vi åkte då på en mässa i Las Vegas. Vi tänkte också att men vi slår 2 flugor i en smäll. Vi ska åka till USA. Vi passar på att göra några intervjuer också, lite gästavsnitt. Och det första gästavsnittet hörde du ju i förra gästavsnittet med svenskan Anna-Karin Eskilsson. Men vi intervjuade även då några amerikaner och i det här avsnittet ska du få höra en av de här intervjuerna.
Precis, så det här avsnittet blir alltså på engelska. Och i det här avsnittet så gästas vi av författaren och entreprenören Michelle Renee. I november år 2000 så kidnappas Michelle och hennes då 7-åriga dotter Bria av 3 maskerade män som stormar in i huset där de bor i San Diego i Kalifornien i USA.
Ja, precis. Och under hot och med bomber fastspända på sina kroppar så tvingas de att råna en bank.
Alltså så sjukt.
Ja, verkligen. Så här i Spöktimmen så ska då Michelle med sina egna ord få berätta om sin kidnappning. Och här kommer vår intervju med henne. Welcome, Michelle. You're actually our first English-speaking guest ever.
Thank you for having me. That's exciting.
Yeah, it's really
I love
exciting. Wow. But you're going to tell us about your kidnapping.
Yes.
And everything that happened after.
Yes, there was a lot to it, that's for sure.
Yeah. Can you tell us about you and your upbringing?
I actually was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and ended up in California when I was about 8 years old. And I grew up as a complete tomboy. And I grew up in a family with 7 kids and my parents, and we did not have a lot of money. And I grew up in a very, very challenging environment, a very challenging home, and ended up just really loving and sort of escaping into sports. And I loved going to school because it was sort of that escape out of sort of the chaos that was home for me. I ended up running away right before my 16th birthday and living with my boyfriend at the time. I ended up moving in with my boyfriend at the time. And for a long time, it was really just this party sort of crazy life until I really decided when I was 20 that that was not the life for me. And before that, I had gone to school to be a certified nurse's assistant. That didn't really work for me. And I just never found anything that just really clicked that much. And when I decided that I really wanted a life that was career focused, that I didn't want to end up like the people that were around me at the time, and I walked away from drugs and all of that, and I ended up getting a part-time job as a teller, as a bank teller, and I really fell in love with the structure. Really, there was such a prestige, especially back then, around becoming an executive banker, and I found that really, really appealing. And so right away, I just fell in love with my career in banking, which started as a part-time drive-up teller. And from there, I just worked my way up the ladder for 13 years. And within that 13 years, I had met my husband. I had become a mother to my amazing daughter and really became a corporate career woman.
What do you do as a bank teller?
As a bank teller, you're the person that people come in and you get money or you deposit their checks. And I ended up, after 13 years, I ended up becoming an assistant vice president and being the person that ran the bank, that ran the branch, that ran the bank. I was the person running the branch. Yeah.
That's really high up.
Yes, it was fun.
Wow.
It was very fun.
How did that make you feel? Like kind of journey you went on?
I loved it. It made me feel like I had beaten the odds because of the way that I grew up to become, somebody with this sort of title and this job and wearing a suit every day. It felt like such a complete departure from my life growing up. And it felt like I had really sort of made it over that hump of, am I going to become a statistic and, become somebody that turns out to be a teen runaway where the ending of their story is not great. And I felt like I had beat the odds in that way. And it just felt really good to be kind of standing on my own, making my own money, being a career woman. I eventually became a single mother. So then my career became even more important to me. But no, it felt great. It felt like, I felt like this very professional. And when you grow up the way I do, and it's funny, I just did my own podcast yesterday about this, and leaving school when I did and leaving home when I did, you end up thinking I'm not smart enough to have success, and that made me feel like, I can do this. I am smart enough to do this. Yeah.
And what does your life look like during 2000, the year 2000?
2000, in terms of that day, it was just a regular, typical day. I mean, I dropped my daughter off at school. I drove to the bank. I worked 10 hours and I was rushing to pick her up so I wasn't late, which I was late kind of often because I was the boss and I was running, I was really busy in my career. So she would go to after school care and I would try to get there on time. And I remember rushing and weaving through the back roads to get there as quick as possible. We got home and I was making homemade pizzas that night. I wanted to just make homemade pizzas for dinner. And she was sitting and playing with her Game Boy. And we were hanging out on the couch. And suddenly it was just the loudest noise coming from behind us that it's really indescribable. The sound of when somebody kicks your door in and the door jam and the wood is flying everywhere. It is this loud thundering sound that is so out of nowhere, and you spin in the direction to see where the sound is coming from, and you just see three men dressed in black with masks, with guns, with a duffel bag, and coming at you SWAT style very, very quickly. And before I could turn to really see what was going on, see where my daughter, what her face was, how she was, like she was trying to go in the direction of my bedroom door. But before either one of us could barely move, we were being grabbed by the back of the head and shoved to the floor. And then I could just hear duct tape unripping and unraveling.
And what's going through your head?
Just please don't hurt my daughter. Don't hurt her. Please. I was just begging. I was screaming, no, no, no. Don't hurt her. Don't hurt her. And, at that point I was face down on the carpet. I couldn't see her. I couldn't hear her. I did not know what was going on. Obviously, I had no idea why anybody would be there. And the first thought that went through my mind is, are they here to rape us? Are they here to murder us? That was really, I couldn't have imagined that they were there for any other reason. And I certainly never would have imagined that they were there because of my job.
And how old is your daughter then?
Bria is 7.5 at the time. Yeah. And I'm 35 at the time.
And what do they tell you when they come in?
They are screaming, shut up, cut the lights. So they're cutting the lights. They're making sure we don't have any access to phones, telling us to be quiet. If we don't be quiet, they're gonna pistol whip us. We've got guns to our heads. Eventually, I hear my daughter say, "Are you going to kill my mommy?" And they eventually just put me up to my knees and spun me around where I could see her. And she was laying down on the carpet face down with one of them standing over her with a gun at her. And you are helpless. You are completely helpless because as a mom, you do everything in your power to protect your children from anybody ever harming them. And in a lot of ways, in that way, you're thinking, there's nothing I can do to protect her right now. There's nothing I can do to stop this from happening. And it is just the most excruciating, painful thing to see as a mother. They eventually pull us up to the couch. They let us sit next to each other on the couch with duct tape. And they begin to tell me or us that everything they'd been watching us do for 2 months. So they've been stalking us for 2 months everywhere. They knew where she went to school. They knew where my best friend lived. They knew where I had wine to drink at a restaurant 2 nights before. They knew when we shopped at the mall and were following us through the mall. I mean, this was really, really planned out by these people. And the reason that they did that is they really want to mess with your mind during those 14 hours of being held hostage. They're telling you, I know all these things about you. If you mess up, I know where she goes to school. I know where your best friend lives. I know this about you. I know that about you. So there's that brainwashing that's going on almost immediately. And that's what they did. They were saying everything they saw me do. They saw me go. They saw me out with my boyfriend. They watched me through the windows of my home when my boyfriend was there visiting. And so it was so violating in so many ways, not just them breaking in, but then hearing of them stalking me and watching me. And it was just so many layers of violation, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Wow. Did you notice them at all?
I didn't until later. It was interesting how I ended up recognizing that one of them had actually been into my banking center before. He was in my banking center the day before.
Oh, wow.
And I ended up recognizing him because we needed to go to the bathroom. And they didn't let us go to the bathroom alone. They followed us in there, kept guns on us the whole time. And when you're walking in the restroom, it's habit. You walk in and you flip the light on just like you would do. It's just habit. And I did that and I spun around and I actually, with the light on, could see his eyes and his mask was cut really, it was almost too small for him because it was just like a ski mask where they cut holes in the eyes and it was only up to his chin. And so I could see his neck and a little bit of his skin here and his stature. And certain things just clicked in that instant, like, oh my gosh, this is the person that was at my desk yesterday.
Can you tell us about that day, the day before?
Oh, I was at work. This man came in. He said he was getting ready, believe it or not, to come into some money and wanted to talk about investments. He sat at my desk. He was dressed very oddly to me. He had this black and gold vest on with no shirt underneath it. It was not attractive at all. It was very strange.
Yeah.
And which made me already have this strange sense about him already when he sat down. And he had a distinct look about him. He had very sort of protruding, bulging eyes that were kind of red and watery. And he was shorter and stockier. And he definitely stood out for me. And when he was there for a while, and I was kind of wondering why he kept asking me the same questions. He picked up the photo of my daughter on my desk and said, oh, something about, do you have a husband or something? I said, oh, it's just me and my daughter. I didn't think anything of it. And my dog. And then a woman walked in and said, hey, Chris, it's time to go. We need to go. So what was really interesting is when I recognized him in the house that night, he was on a walkie-talkie talking to a woman. And they would call each other money one to money two, money one to money two. And I recognized the voice of the woman that came into the bank, the woman's voice on the walkie-talkie. It just all it's almost like time stopped. It was like everything just crystallized. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know who this is. And I can't let them know that I know, because then we will certainly be killed. And I had to kind of just look away and go, okay, just keep it together. Try to, take in all the details that you can. I looked down and noticed what kind of shoes he was wearing, how tall he was compared to how many tiles up on the wall he was. And the sound of their pants was like the swoosh of nylon. So I knew it was nylon pants that they were wearing. So my brain just went into paying attention to all these details that I could hopefully, if we survived, I could share with the police.
And what are they talking about over the walkie-talkie?
They were saying things like, everything's good here, money 1 to money 2, stay in place, let us know if anybody's coming up the driveway. So it sounded like she was the lookout. She was somewhere outside in a car, probably dropped them off, and was the lookout, making sure that no one else is coming up the street, no one else is coming up near the house.
And when do they tell you what they want?
They eventually tell us that you are going to rob the bank for us. We are going to put dynamite sticks on you and your daughter. And at the time, I had a roommate at the time, and she was playing softball. She wasn't getting home until really late. But they said, this is what you are going to do. We know everything about your schedule at the bank. We know where you park. We know what time you get there. We know when the armored car does the money delivery. We know when they get there. We know when they leave. They knew everything. And they were making it very clear that if I did not follow absolutely everything they told me to do, that we were going to be murdered and that my daughter would be first.
Oh, wow. What do you think about that?
There's no time to think. There's only, how am I going to pull this off? How am I going to save us from being murdered? How am I going to save our lives? Like, you go into absolute automatic mode where you just do everything that you can. And the pressure of, I can't mess up. If I mess up, we're dead and it's my fault. And so all of that kind of pressure really began to, and showed up much later too in my life after surviving the kidnapping and the trauma that really played a heavy role in my life and trying to recover and heal from all of this. That pressure played a big part as well.
Can you tell us about when your roommate comes home?
We were on a softball team together, but that night it was a late game and it was too cold. I didn't want my daughter to be out in the cold, so I opted not to go to the game. Our last game of the season, apparently we won. They went out to celebrate afterwards and she came home very tipsy. And when she came in the door, they immediately grabbed her, put her to the floor, but she was intoxicated and she was not happy. She was arguing with them. She was trying to yell at them. It really made them agitated. And they finally just grabbed her and pulled her into the back room. I didn't know what happened to her. They came back out and said, we took care of her. She's uncooperative. Wow. I did not know what that meant for a while. And I was really nervous about what that meant. They eventually brought her back out and sat her next to me on the couch and said, tell her that we are not messing around. This is serious. This is real. We will kill you if you do not rob the bank and do everything we tell you to do. And I just begged her. I said, please, this is, my child. Her kids weren't there. And I think it would be very different if they would have had her children, but they didn't. And I had to get her to calm down so that they would calm down as well.
And you are being kidnapped during the entire night, right?
All night for 14 hours.
And what do the kidnappers do? Are they talking to you or what's going on?
At one point, they were kind of taking turns. They would rotate.
Okay.
So at one point, one of them would go in the back into the kids' room and we wouldn't see him for a while. Whether they were doing drugs or sleeping or what they were doing, we don't know. We have no idea. And then they would come out and then one of them would go in the kitchen and they were rummaging through our food and they were going through all of our things in our home and gathering valuable things and putting them in a pile to steal our things. They rummaged through our purse and took all the contents of our purse that they wanted. So they were rummaging through the house. They were, at one point they turned on music. At one point they turned on a movie. Like, this is all night long. So they were finding things to do and kind of taking turns watching over us. And at one point my daughter said, I just need to go lay down, Mommy. And they let me take her into my room and let her lay down in my bed. And I sat with her next to her. And one of them sat at the end of the bed with a gun pointed towards us while she slept. And I just played with her hair and just cried. You know, I didn't know if this would be the last time that I would ever be able to touch her hair and snuggle with her and just, you know, and be with her in that way.
Oh, that's so awful.
Yeah, it was horrific.
Yeah. Did the woman ever come to the house?
She never came into the house. She stayed out the whole time.
And how are the kidnappers acting? Do they seem like stressed or something?
No, they were calm. They were not stressed. They were just, it seemed like this was so planned out that it was obvious that they had a role, that each of them had a role. One of them was by the front door sitting in a chair, and he was kind of the lookout. They had a big dog, a Rottweiler, that they brought into the house that would sit with us and circle us. They said, if you try anything, it will attack you. I mean, they had guns, they had a dog, they had spears. That was just craziness. And it was just obviously it was very surreal. You just feel like, is this a nightmare? Is this really happening? And everything's sort of happening in slow motion. And they eventually say, it's time for you to get ready for work. Go take a shower and get ready for work. We know your routine. You can't show up looking like a mess. You've got to make this look like a normal day at the bank. And they picked out my clothes that I was going to wear. They then put the dynamite sticks on us and duct taped them to our bodies and duct taped them to my daughter really, really tightly. And she was just crying, Mommy, it's hurting me, it's hurting me. And it was just, you feel it digging into your back and the duct tape around your ribs. And it's just all of the senses, you know, you hear their voices, you feel it's digging into your back. You hear the duct tape unripping, you see the dog, it was just, everything is just now starting to just replay over and over and over in the mind. And you have to really get ready to do the unimaginable and try to save your child. When they take me to go to the bank, they end up taking my daughter from me and putting her in a closet and duct taping her. And I remember when I was leaving and I could hear her screaming, no, Mommy, don't leave. And her screams just started to fade because I just kind of left my body in a way and became very disconnected and had this very dissociative experience where I just felt like a robot. There wasn't any thinking going on. It was just, you're programmed to do this thing and you are a robot to go do this horrific thing and hopefully get back to find her alive. I end up being driven to the bank by the ringleader, and they had given me very strict instructions. I had 5 minutes from the time the money was dropped off to the time the money truck left to get out of the bank with the duffel bag they gave me full of money out of the vault. So I ended up going into the vault after the money drop happened and clearing out the vault and filling the duffel bag with money and walking out of the bank with a duffel bag full of money.
What do you say when you enter the bank?
I had the keys. I was a manager, so I'm obviously trying to play it off like I don't have a bomb on my back and my child isn't in a closet. We're not going to be murdered at any moment. And I just say I literally said it's going to be a very unusual day. And I have a brand new teller that's just starting that day from another branch, and she wants to get set up. And I say, let's just wait, because I knew the bank was going to be shut down. I knew there wasn't going to be any business that day. And somebody was asking me for help with something on the computer, and I said, I trust you, just handle it. And it was really just me trying to figure out how not to act suspicious and not, I was trying to act normal in a situation that was anything but normal.
Does anyone react that something is different?
In the aftermath, when they interviewed some of my employees and some of the staff, they said Michelle was definitely off. We could tell that there was something going on, that she was not herself at all, because I'm usually really bubbly and friendly and good morning, everybody. I was that boss, and I was numb. I was just numb. I was checked out. I was fighting for our lives in that moment. There was no way for me to sort of be myself and be bubbly and, have a cheerful demeanor and wish everybody a wonderful day. It wasn't like that,
What were you afraid was going to happen if anyone noticed?
I was afraid that they would call corporate security, or the people outside would notice that we were calling corporate security, because if we picked up the phone and tried to call the police or anything, they would detonate the explosives or they would kill us right then and there. So I didn't know if I was going to be alive moment to moment. And if anything, any misstep happened in any way in the branch at all, I had no idea what was I didn't even know what had already happened to her. I didn't know if she was already dead. I didn't know if they took her from the house and took her someplace else and kidnapped her and I would never see her again. I had no idea. I just knew that I was told to do this, and if I did this, that I would see her again. And I knew that my task was to get them all the money out of the vault and go out to my car and give it to them and hope and pray that we were going to survive this.
What happens after you walk out?
I get to my Jeep, I throw the money in the Jeep, and I'm instructed to go park somewhere down the street and get out of my Jeep. And he took off in my Jeep with the money. I was told to count to a certain number and then turn around and walk in a certain direction. And I would find my Jeep, and I was supposed to get in my Jeep and drive straight home. No stopping at the branch, no calling the cops, no nothing. And that's what I did. I found my Jeep. It was still running. It had the keys still in it. And I saw this car, this very strange, almost like a rust-colored older car, pulling away from in front of my Jeep really, really quickly, speeding away. From what I now understand, that was the car that was coming to pick him up when he got out of my Jeep. Well, I noticed part of the license plate. So I grabbed a pen out of my Jeep glove box and just wrote the numbers down on the seat of my car. And I just drove straight home as fast as I could, and sitting at a stoplight and just looking around and feeling like I wanted to scream to the people in the car next to me, help, help. And you can't. And everybody's having this normal day, and I have bombs on me, and I just robbed a bank, and my daughter might be dead. And I'm just looking around like I am in some alternate universe. It was so unbelievably surreal. Nothing felt real. Nothing felt real.
What happens when you get home?
I go in the front door and I'm screaming, Bria, Bria, and I hear her say, Mommy, Mommy. So I knew she was alive. She was still in the closet. My roommate ends up taking the dynamite off of me, cutting the duct tape and ripping it and taking the dynamite off of me. The men who had stayed back at the house with them had already removed the dynamite from them. And so she said, they just ripped it right off of me. She's like, it was like, they ripped it. I know I can do this, because I was like, you guys go get help. I'll stay here. I don't want to go. I'll stay here. You're alive. I love you. If I explode, I don't want, you know what I mean? What do I do? She's like, no, I'm going to take it off of you. And she did. And we put it outside on the retaining wall, and we ran to the neighbors for help, which was up a really, really, really steep hill. And we were met by this gate, and we had to just keep pushing the button, help, help, help us. And the gate opened, and we had to run up even more of this very steep hill to our neighbors, because we didn't have any neighbors close by. We lived out in the country. So we had nothing but just rural country all around us, like acres of just, brush and dirt. And so our neighbors were up on this hill, kind of, a little bit of a distance away. And we finally ended up at the house and called 911, called the branch, called the bank. We're alive, closed the bank down, called corporate security, called 911. And that's when the FBI and the police and everybody started showing up. And then you could see our house from our neighbor's house. And it was just like this crazy scene from a movie where the helicopters and the police, and then the bomb squad comes and the yellow tape is everywhere. And you're just standing there just thinking, I mean, this really just happened. Like, I don't know what my life is. What is life going to become now? And the FBI came and took my daughter from me. They said, we need to separate the two of you, which was horrible. I mean, we just went through this horrific ordeal, and the first thing they do is separate us. But intellectually, I get that. I get that they have to separate us so they can talk to me and what I say doesn't influence. I get it from an intellectual perspective, but from a human perspective, the last thing your child needs is for someone else to come take you away from your mother that's a stranger. And for me, the last thing I needed was for somebody to tear my daughter off of my leg and have her crying again. Don't leave me. Don't let them take me. It was just another trauma and more pain on top of pain.
It was horrific.
Yeah.
And her being so young as well.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking. It was just heartbreaking. And we were there for a long time being questioned. They wouldn't let family reach out to us. They wouldn't let us talk to anybody. And eventually they gave us car keys to a rental car because everything was now evidence, and an address written on a piece of paper for us to go stay at a hotel. And they let us go by ourselves with nobody following us or protecting us or anything. It was really something. And the shock and the trauma and the post-traumatic stress had already began. And driving to the hotel, I remember pulling over, getting sick, hiding behind bushes because we're thinking they got their money, they got everything they wanted. They're in my mind, I was like, we're still not out of danger. They could kill us right now so that we don't talk. And we don't know who these people are and who they might be affiliated with, which we found out they were in a gang. Every step, every movement just felt like this big, heavy, arduous thing.
And what can you tell the police about the kidnappers? What did you find out during the kidnapping?
I told them everything. I mean, I told them like how many tiles tall he was, the guy that I recognized that came into the bank and that he was at my desk. And I was saying, cover my desk. Like his fingerprints have to be there. He gave me a business card. It's in my top right-hand drawer. This person was in the bank and I knew that. And I was telling them over and over. And I was kind of obsessing about it because I was like, I know this is him. And the woman, this is them. I was telling them everything that we discovered, like the type of shoes they were wearing, the kind of clothes they were wearing, how tall they were. One was a really big guy. He was like a big football player guy. And the other one was just really very skinny. He was like almost emaciated. He was so wiry and thin. And then the other guy was stocky and he was the ringleader. And the nicknames they were calling each other. One guy was named Bones. One guy was Big Hershey. And the other guy was Money 1 and Money 2. So they had nicknames. So I was just telling them everything I could remember and all the details I was picking up on and trying to pay attention to that night, the whole night.
How long does it take before they find your kidnappers?
For 3 of them, I think it was about 2 weeks when they finally captured the three of them. One of them was on the run. He had changed his name, gotten a fake ID, and went out of state. And America's Most Wanted aired an episode looking for him, and they found him in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And that was, I think, about a month or so later. So they found him in Milwaukee and had to bring him back to California to face charges. And he actually ended up being the one that came back and confessed everything. Three of them actually confessed. But the woman who confessed everything, she was tried with her boyfriend. So they would not allow her confession into court. So the jury never heard her confession because her confession implicated her boyfriend. So because of our crazy, terrible justice system in some ways, her confession was never heard.
Okay.
It was not allowed in court. And she confessed to everything on video. Everything that was her idea, laughing about the things that was her idea, she was not okay. I mean, these people were just, and her specifically, I mean, her confession was, I mean, it just seemed evil that she was laughing about her idea to come up with putting bombs on a child and a mother. And it was just really, I don't know, it was just almost creepy to watch her. You know, you could tell like something's just off with this woman.
Pure evil.
Yeah, she was not a good human.
And how did they even come up with that idea to rob a bank?
One of them, the ringleader, is a convicted bank robber from Atlanta.
Okay.
So he had robbed banks and been arrested for bank robbery before in another state. So I guess when they decided they were going to rob a bank, it was the woman's idea. Why would you just rob a teller when you could get all the money out of the vault? Why don't you just kidnap the manager? And it was, they came up with this big whole scheme so that they could get more money.
And how much money did they get?
$360,000, which is not a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, in my mind. And you have to split it between whoever was involved. I mean, I just think it ruined their lives. It ruined their lives for the, I mean, it.
What can you tell us about the trial?
Oh, the trial. That was, talk about more pain and more trauma.
Reliving everything?
Not just reliving everything, but I told you about my childhood and my past and different things about my life. Well, the defense attorneys decided that they wanted to take everything about my past and not only use it against me, but the ringleader came up with a whole story. It wasn't even the ringleader, it was the ringleader's lawyer. And the ringleader's defense attorney came up with this whole story that I was the ringleader, that I met him in a grocery store and recruited him, and this was all my plan.
Oh, wow.
And it was really, really ugly. It was really, really painful to see how this would even be allowed in our courts of law. Like, how is this even possible? They had so much evidence against these people. They found every bit of evidence you can imagine, from everything that was stolen, some of the money they found, our stuff that they stole from us in the trunk of the car, along with the guns and the evidence back at their homes. I mean, mountains of evidence. And 3 out of 4 of them confessed. The only one that didn't confess was the ringleader. And that's the story that his attorney came up with, is to attack me because of my past. And because I was a runaway, because I was a divorced single mother who filed bankruptcy after my divorce because I couldn't keep doing everything myself. And they went after me, and they did everything they could do to just discredit me and attack my credibility in court. And it was really, really hard. That was on top of everything. And it was printed in all the newspapers. And this is my town. Like,
oh, wow.
We're thinking, her school teachers are reading this, or, my potential employers could be reading this. Potential people I might meet someday and date or whatever are reading this about me. And it's all lies, just to defend a man who would do this to a child and her mother. All of this just to try to get this person back out on the streets. You're going to further try to destroy our life. It was unbelievable. I couldn't believe it was happening I couldn't believe it was even allowed to happen in our courts of law. I don't know if this happens in other parts of the world like Sweden, but for here in the United States, it happens all the time. All the time.
Wow.
In 2 of the cases that we know of, they ended up being sentenced to multiple life terms plus 36 and 68 years. So they were looking at prison until they were in their 70s.
Oh, wow. Did you have to do one big trial or one trial for every kidnapper?
They did 2 separate trials. They tried 2 together and 2 together.
Oh.
So because they tried the ringleader and his girlfriend together, that's why her confession, from what I was told, wasn't allowed to be admissible in the courtroom. I think she cut a deal and she ended up being acquitted and walking.
Really?
Yeah.
And the boyfriend is the man that was at the bank before?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, he's the ringleader.
Yeah.
He was the mastermind.
So she was just walking free?
She walked free after the trial. She was in jail waiting for the trial for about 2 years. And then after the trial, she was acquitted. She walked. And I think she cut a deal. And again, here in the United States, that happens all the time.
Yeah, we don't have that in Sweden at all.
I wish we didn't have it here.
No,
that's for sure.
Crazy.
That's crazy. I think our justice system is very broken. Very, very broken. To allow those 2 things to happen, for them to attack me after everything I'd already gone through, and they knew the truth. They knew that I wasn't involved. They knew the truth. They read all the confessions, which the ringleader eventually confessed that it was all lies very recently at his parole hearing. And for that to be allowed to happen is tragic, in my opinion. For victims to be treated that way in court is very tragic. But also for her to be able to walk with a full confession with all that evidence against her, and for her to be able to cut some sort of a deal with the judge and with the police to say, I will rat out my boyfriend for these other things that he did if I get acquitted. So I think she cut a deal. And I think both of those things being allowed to happen in our justice system is very tragic and very broken.
Did the police find all the money?
They did not, because they had already spent some.
On what?
One of them went to Vegas and thought he was, Jay-Z or something. I mean, he really just thought he was a high roller in Vegas and just went there trying to make it rain with a bunch of money and spent a lot of his money there. But they ended up finding these safes. They each had safes that they bought, and they found these safes with money in it. The only money that wasn't recovered besides what they spent, because they found receipts and different things that they could piece the money trail together, was the ringleader and his girlfriend had to fly back to Atlanta, and they left their safe full of money with somebody they thought they trusted, which was their babysitter. And they got a call while they were out of town saying that the safe had been stolen. So the ringleader and his girlfriend ended up having the safe full of their money supposedly stolen, and ended up with nothing and being arrested when they got back from Atlanta.
Wow.
Very ironic.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
And what happened to the woman after?
From what I understand, she just went back to a life of thugs and drugs.
Okay.
And lost custody of her children.
And the rest of them are in jail or prison?
They are, except for one. One of them has been released. And we ended up, several years after the sentencing, my daughter and I chose to not carry any of this negative pain or anger or anything forward with us at all. We decided that we were going to focus on some of the good that came from it. Like, I never went back to banking. I decided to take a couple of years to just be a mom And it was really the most beautiful time of my life. We ended up living in Alaska for the year. I drove from San Diego to Alaska by myself to get back to my daughter, which is what my book 9 Days is about. It's the journey to Alaska to get back to her. And I'm flashing back to the crime, and I'm flashing back to my childhood, and I'm healing on that road trip. It's really a fantastic memoir that I'm really, really proud of. I hope everybody picks up a copy of that. And we ended up deciding to write one of them a letter in prison saying that we hope that you find a way to heal the way that we have. We don't hate you. We don't see you as a monster. And we're not carrying any negativity related to what happened. We release all of that. We forgive you. We're done. And that was it. He responded during the pandemic. We got a letter during the pandemic back. I mean, this letter was 3 pages long, and our letter to him changed his entire life in prison. He said that you humanized me again. You didn't see me as a monster. I could finally no longer see myself as a monster. And all the pain and the shame and everything, he said, he just broke down reading our letter and couldn't believe that we could be that kind and that compassionate. And he ended up doing all this spiritual work in prison and being an amazing, stellar inmate and becoming one of the leaders and helping other people. And we ended up going and meeting him. And recently we're at San Quentin prison meeting another one of them and meeting him and his family. And we have some hopefully really great things in the future to talk about his healing journey and their healing journey and their transformation too.
And how is it to see them again?
Oh my gosh. Well, it was, I think the anticipation of seeing them again was, we weren't sure. It was myself and my daughter and my brother Dave, Dave's been with us through all of this every step of the way. And we weren't sure how they were going to respond. We had already had a phone call. So we kind of knew his voice and we knew his tone from his letter. But we didn't really know. And we didn't know, obviously, the family members and walking in if there was going to be, what kind of energy that was going to be, what kind of emotions were going to be a part of that meeting. You know what I mean? And this is who we are. We decide we're going to show up with gifts and a plant, and we're going to make the room feel a little warmer. And we bring a present for, his mom, and we bring a gift for him that was like a book that we thought would be really good for him to read. And, we're coming in with gifts and they're just sitting there. They don't move when we walk in. And my brother Dave breaks the ice and says, let's just all hug it out. And that's exactly what happened. Everybody stood up. There was just so much I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And then we really got to, dive into a conversation about what led him to, be a part of something like this and walk down such a dark path. And so that, that part of the story is for another time, but being able to really bring this full circle and see my daughter be the kind of woman that she has become, that can sit across from him. And the first thing she asked him, and this was the man that attacked her, and the first thing that she asked him, she said, I just want to know how you're doing. How are you? And it was probably one of the proudest moments of my entire life to know that this is who my daughter is. This is the woman that she is because of the choices we made, or that I made as a parent, that I made as a mother, to guide her through healing in the right way, in the best way, and not stay angry and bitter and I hate them and they're monsters, and because that would have continued to harm her.
Yeah.
And that just was not an option for me.
Oh, wow.
At all.
Do you think that helped you heal in a way?
It was a choice to heal. Healing's a choice that we have to make. And sometimes that choice to heal is many times in the same day. And sometimes then it starts to lessen. And then we have to, the healing, sometimes it's minute by minute when you're in the throes of the worst trauma you've ever experienced. healing is a choice moment by moment, and then minute by minute, and then hour by hour, and then maybe day by day. And then, oh my gosh, okay, month by month. And pretty soon, if you're making that choice that you want to heal and you're asking yourself the right kinds of questions, you're not saying, why me? That's going to keep you stuck, right? You keep asking, why me? Why me? That's going to keep you stuck. Ask, what can I learn from this? How can I grow? What is this meant to teach me? And those are the questions I just constantly began asking myself. I still ask myself those questions all the time, because those are what's going to propel us forward and not what's going to keep us stuck and angry and sad.
Do you have any answers for those questions?
I do, actually. I believe that this was meant to teach me compassion. This was meant to teach me to let love lead my life, not to allow the behavior of 3 men and a woman and what they did, not allow that to dictate what the rest of my life was going to be in terms of the pain and the anger and the fear, and live in fear for the rest of my life. This was really meant to teach me what resiliency was all about. This was meant to teach me how to be the most amazing kind of mother I could be through trauma. Not only through my own trauma, but how was I going to help guide her through her own trauma in a way that wasn't going to damage her more? And that's just a little bit of what this taught me. Another part of this is teaching, these were men of color. And I didn't want my daughter to become not only afraid of men in general, but what about relationships with men? What about men touching her and putting their hands on her? There was a lot around how was I going to navigate this as her mother to teach her that all men aren't bad, and that all Black men or Hispanic men aren't bad, and that we can't judge people based on the actions of a few. We cannot judge an entire, the entire male race or an entire race of people or because of the actions of a few. So there were some situations that happened that came up that I had to decide in a split second that I was going to, in a movie theater, that she wanted to get up and move because a Black man and his son sat next to us. And she was like, I feel scared. And I said, no, we're going to stay right here because they're not them. And we're not going to allow this to be part of our life. We're not going to allow this kind of thought process to be a part of our life. So we're going to eat popcorn and we're going to enjoy this movie. And we did. And that was a really big turning point, I think, because if I would have decided to what if I would have got up and moved and said, okay, let's get up and move? That would have fed the fear. We can live our lives without that kind of fear, 100%. So there were a lot of those things. There were a lot of things I learned, so many things I learned from this that made my life better, more gratitude, much more, kind of live in the moment. Live in the moment because you don't know when something crazy is going to happen. Like something crazy could happen in a blink of an eye. And you sat on the couch yesterday instead of going and doing something that you really, really, really wanted to do just because, I have friends that are like, oh, I'm not going to go see that movie I really want to go see because no one will go with me. And I'm like, I'm going to the theater by myself. I'm going to go live life. I'm not waiting for anybody else. I'm getting ready to go to a music festival for 3 days by myself because I want to go live and enjoy my life while I can. Yeah.
And you said one of them were released from prison. Was that the man who wrote you the letter?
That's the man that wrote the letter.
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to see him in 2 weeks.
Mm. And how does it feel to meet him again?
It's interesting to say this, but I'm rooting for him. I want him to win. I want him to be successful with the second chance with his life. I want his mom to be proud of him. I want his children to be proud of him. And if I can be a part of helping him to be that man that he can be proud of, which is exactly what we did. She spoke up for him at his parole hearing.
Okay.
And said, let him go be with his family. And my daughter's a big reason why he was paroled and able to go be with his family. And so now, it's about whether or not he's going to be comfortable with me helping him tell his story in some crazy way that the person you kidnapped and held hostage is now going to hopefully either interview you or talk to you or be able to tell your redemption and your transformation, your healing story to inspire so many people. That's really my hope for the future.
That's really amazing to hear.
Thank you.
It's really inspiring that you look at this traumatic experience like this.
Thank you. It's again, it's having trust. It's letting compassion lead the way instead of letting your fear and your anger lead the way. Just try to let understanding have a space in your life. I wanted to understand why they would do this. It wasn't just like they did this, they ruined my life, I hate them. It was like, okay, after things settled a little bit, I was driving to Alaska, that question kept coming up over and over in my mind, like, what happened to them? How did they get to the point to be doing something like this? Like, I really wanted to understand what happened to make them do this. I'm already like very curious about psychology and human behavior anyways. So for me, I was like, just really wanted to understand them. I wanted to understand why they would do this.
What led up to you writing that letter?
My daughter and I beginning to live our life in a way where we wanted to be free from all of it. We just wanted to be free. Because for me, if you're hanging on to anger and you're hanging on to fear, letting that run your life, you're pretty much shackled. I mean, we're in prison with that, just a different kind of prison. They're in prison too, but we're in a whole different kind. We're in an emotional prison. We are shackled and chained and held hostage emotionally as long as we hang on to hate and anger and bitterness and unforgiveness. As long as we hang on to all that, we're never going to be free. We're never going to be free. And I didn't want that for myself, and I definitely didn't want that for my daughter. And I said, that's it. This guy is the one that turned around at the sentencing and said he was sorry. He was the first one to confess. And there was just some sort of something about him that he was the one that I knew we were meant to write this letter to, just to pour it out, get this out, and send it and say, this is the last piece of what is still holding us hostage. And now that we've got this down, now that we're telling them, we release this, and we put that in the mail and put that in the mailbox. And just as soon as that dropped in the mailbox, it was like, the chains just dropped off. They were no longer a part of our life.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to go back a bit. The explosive, they aren't real, are they?
We find out that the explosives are actually wooden dowel sticks that they hand cut. They cut and painted them to look exactly like dynamite sticks with wires coming out of them, with black electrical tape. They looked so real that the bomb squad did not know that they weren't real until they got within 2 inches of it to actually see the wood grain underneath the paint. So they were very, very, very real looking replicas that they actually made in their garage, which is part of the evidence that they found at the house that was part of the court trial. They found the tape, they found the paint, they found the cut dowel sticks at the house, they found the wires, they found everything that they used to make these sticks at their house, and that was part of the evidence that they collected.
Were the guns real?
The guns were real.
Yeah, okay.
The spears were real, the guns were real. Yeah.
During the trial, how did they explain that they found all of this? Like making the dynamite, like the wires, everything?
So As the key witness for the state, I was not allowed to be in the court unless I was testifying. The only person allowed in the court was my brother Dave. He was there every second of every day and knew everything that they were saying. And he tried to warn me about what they were going to do to me on the stand and how they were going to attack me. But I went to the grocery store and I ended up seeing it on front page news of the newspaper in the grocery store before he could tell me. And I just froze in the grocery store. I just lost it and thought, how could this be happening? How could this be happening? But he's the only one that was in the court to really hear everything that was going on when they were presenting all of the evidence. So I don't know what the rebuttal was. I don't know what the defense was saying about. But the second trial of the two that confessed, that was a very fast trial. They confessed. The confessions were heard by the jury. They put all the evidence in. That was a slam dunk, shut, closed case. It was the first trial with the ringleader who didn't confess, who made up all the lies and had a really horrific scumbag of an attorney that came up with this, all the lies and all the story that they would throw out there and really attack me. That was the first trial. So by the time the second trial happened and they had confessed, that trial was easy. It was done and over.
Did that affect the sentences? When they confessed versus...
They got the max because they confessed.
Oh.
Yeah, they got the maximum.
Yeah. And the other one got...
He actually ended up, one of the woman walked, she was acquitted. He got the maximum for what he did to Bria, what he did to my roommate, what he did to the bank, robbing the bank. He actually was found not guilty for kidnapping me.
What?
Yep,
oh, really?
He was found not guilty. He did not get charged for what he did to me because of the lies. And one jury member doubted whether or not I was involved or not. I wish I knew her name to this day because I would really like to send her his full confession that he just did during his parole and all of the and just everything and just say, thanks, lady, And it was a woman. I'm like, how could a woman think that?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
What's the maximum sentence?
He got 3 consecutive life sentences plus 64 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the others got 3 consecutive life sentences plus 38 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming and being our first American guest on our podcast.
This has been my honor, honestly. It's so great to have you here in Los Angeles. Thank you so much for being here, for what you're doing as women out there, just absolutely crushing the game here on your podcast. And thank you for having me. It's been fantastic.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Gud, alltså det här är en sån sjuk historia.
Ja, det är en otrolig story och vi träffade ju även då Michelles dotter också och pratade väldigt mycket sen off-cam. Alltså väldigt, väldigt roligt att träffa dem båda två.
Verkligen.
Och Michelle har ju då skrivit en bok också. Den heter 9 Days Living with My Soul Wide Open After Violent Trauma. Och vill du läsa den här boken så har vi länkat den i beskrivningen. Och hon har även skrivit en bok om själva kidnappningen. Och den här boken heter Held Hostage, A True Story of a Mother and Daughter's Kidnapping.
Precis. Och med det här avsnittet så är vi färdiga med säsong 16.
Det är vi. Nu knyter vi ihop säcken helt enkelt.
Precis, och som vi sa i tisdagens avsnitt så blir det alltså ingen spöksommar utan vi kör avsnitt från Spöktimmens arkiv istället.
Precis.
Och så kommer vi med nya avsnitt den 20 augusti igen.
Mycket, mycket, mycket tidigare än vad vi brukar göra. Och du som missade det i förra avsnittet, så anledningen till att det inte blir någon spöksommar är för att vi håller på att skriva en bok.
Exakt.
Men vi kan inte berätta mer nu, utan det blir en cliffhanger under sommaren.
Precis. Tack för den här säsongen och tack för att du har lyssnat.